Hello and welcome back to James' Take, and we have quite the take this week. As you recall, I recently spoke about how AI has some difficulty with small and medium-sized businesses adopting it because the amount of work that it takes to get AI to be functional in those businesses exceeds what those businesses are able to deploy in terms of mental capacity or personnel resources taken away from other projects to be focused on trying to get the AI to work for their business. And that's something that really needs to be fixed because most small businesses, when they pick up Claude or when they pick up ChatGPT, they really do expect zero shot. That is the first time you put something in a prompt to work the first time. And so when they encounter errors or they don't know how to format their prompt properly, they encounter obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And that really limits their ability to deploy this AI in the way that they really feel like it could be beneficial to them. But it's not just small and medium-sized businesses that encounter these pitfalls. In fact, this episode might be called The Present Pitfalls of AI, and that large businesses have to deal with much more unique pitfalls that small businesses deploying AI don't necessarily have to worry about. So today, I'm going to be talking about some of the major pitfalls large businesses face when using AI. And the first is legal liability. Now, in businesses, there are things called agents, and agents are uniquely gifted with the ability to sign contracts or other legal obligations that a business is beholden to and required to execute on. So, for instance, when a salesperson signs a contract, the business is now beholden to that contract because that sales agent was acting as an agent of the business. Well, the same thing is true, but you may not have thought about it with AI, and that when you deploy AI in a customer-facing role and it makes certain promises, the courts, at least in the West, have ruled that those promises are legally enforceable. And look no further than where Air Canada deployed an AI chatbot who incorrectly told a customer that their ticket was refundable. And it ended up being that they had to honor that, even though their own policy stated that most tickets were not refundable. They had to honor the AI chatbot. So that's something that's going to face AI in large institutions, in that they're going to have to deal with AI and its ability to hallucinate answers and then being charged as an agent. Now, the second pitfall that comes with large AI deployments is that even though you might have an agreement with Microsoft or an agreement with Meta or an agreement with OpenAI that they will not use your data to train, you may encounter a situation whereby your data is still leaking out into the environment as a whole. And that happens primarily through what is called, in IT, we had a word for it, shadow IT. And the way that works is when a business has software and it may be difficult to use, people might find their own solutions. And so they might get Dropbox if SharePoint is hard to use, and they start using that, or they start putting content on Google Drive when you're using OneDrive and all that managed environment. And suddenly all the employees start referencing documents and other things stored in their own personal drives. And then what happens if that person gets fired or they quit? And suddenly you have your CRM or all the other documentation your company uses start getting locked up, or it's no longer available because people use their own shadow IT. It's left the control of your building. Well, that happens with AI in the real world, where they may have AI deployed, especially in large corporations, but then people are discovering that the AI that they're using is limited in some way, either via policy or otherwise. So they end up leaking company personal information into, say, ChatGPT or Claude when they start asking it questions. And you may think, well, this is a hypothetical. No one's willing to actually do that in the real world, right? Except it's happening at Samsung, where their Samsung employees were putting that content into an AI, and then it was training off of that. Because when you put something into even ChatGPT, it trains off of that data. And you might end up, and this is a problem for large corporations, you might end up training your competitor because your content's going out into AI. So you got to ask yourself, hey, do I want to train my competitor? And in fact, this might be a golden opportunity for a startup somewhere to consider, AI might be really, really good at statistical analysis, but how do we get the benefits of the AI without necessarily telegraphing and having this AI getting trained on our material? Because yes, we do want it trained on our material, but do we actually want it trained on what's underlying, or do we want it trained on how that data is to be analyzed? So for instance, let's say you're selling widgets and you have a lot of widgets, but you don't necessarily want everyone to know that you're dealing in widgets. So you actually encode that widget and give it a name Bauble. And now you could start feeding these encoded things like, we have 429 baubles that we've sold. This is our profit margin based off of existing inventory and existing demand. How do you analyze and project for? So AI can do that data analysis without necessarily knowing that the underlying stuff it's working with, these baubles, were actually widgets. And so there's an opportunity for that type of movement in there. And then we also have problems with AI in large enterprises, is that most AI, it wants to do everything in and of itself. In other words, it's not willing so much to hand off things to stuff that might be better. For instance, a math subsystem, because AI are really great at predicting the next token. But math is an entirely different beast. It's not about prediction. 1 + 1 still equals 2. It's not a percentage of how much is 2. So though an AI can get it right, it can also hallucinate that the answer is wrong. So you got to wonder how much computation and math and expense this costs in terms of having the AI serve up queries and simple answers to people in regards to math problems that could have been handled by a very simple math subsystem. And that's something that AI needs to really incorporate, is these subsystems to really give them a more massive computational edge. And I do say computational edge because they're already consuming massive amounts of compute. In fact, if you look at the story between OpenAI and Microsoft, when they asked about, hey, what if instead of spreading our compute over multiple regions, what if we had one super region whereby we had all the compute in one place and we could just have this massive supercomputer? And Microsoft got back and said there's no state power grid that would be able to handle the load without knocking the whole grid offline. That's how much compute these AI subsystems could take. So if you have more efficient subsystems that could help reduce some of the computational demand off of the AI and build it into the AI to use that subsystem, you're going to get far more efficient AI, especially for businesses, large businesses. So while we're on the topic of pitfalls with AI, this is something that I didn't really see coming until suddenly it was in my face. And that's the thing with pitfalls. You're walking along and then all of a sudden you fall face first into it and you're like, well, where did this come from? Now, imagine this. You're a corporation, you have a business, you realize that AI can be much better at you in terms of not only taking in data, but also making decisions off of that data and adjusting your prices in real time. And so you go out and you find a service that meets your needs and is able to dynamically adjust your pricing, and you sign up with them. Let's say someone down the street who's also in your same business, talks to you over lunch and you say, oh man, this is great. This is wonderful. I've been having a great time. My profits are up. And they kind of ask, what's going on? You say, well, I'll just let you in a little secret. I've just been really enjoying using XYZ AI. Now, I'm making that up, but it's important. Follow me along here. And they're like, okay. So they look it up and then they see that that service is excellent. So they go ahead and sign up for that service as well. And then the person further down the block also signs it. So that way, a whole bunch of people in your region have all signed up with contracts with this one company to deliver AI dynamic pricing. And then you get hit with a Sherman antitrust lawsuit. And you realize, wait a minute, I don't get it. I'm using software from a company and that company is dynamically changing my prices to maximize just my profit. Why am I being hit with a Sherman Antitrust Act? And that actually happens. It's happening to hotels right now. They're getting hit with the Sherman Antitrust Act because they're all signed up with the AI. And the claim in that lawsuit is that the AI, by having access to everyone's data, is causing collusion between all the hotels to price fix against the consumer. So now as a company, you got to realize, hey, if I choose to use a available API and have that AI do work for me, especially for setting prices, is there enough of my other competitors using that same AI to suddenly make me complicit in a Sherman Antitrust Act? Now there's a question that hasn't been answered. So this, there's solutions to that whereby you use an internal AI model to make these decisions for you, but it may not be as powerful because the thing about the internal model, it has to run now on hardware that you have to source, and this hardware isn't cheap. When you use an open AI call, they're tapping into hardware that on each GPU can cost $40,000. And so now you have to ask yourself as a business, do I want the risk of buying a whole bunch of very expensive hardware to run a model that's sufficiently powerful enough to take all the data that I need and have the memory to be able to say, here are the prices based off of time of day and everything else, the device type? Do I want to spend, $40 or $50 million potentially on just getting a rack of these things and then have to worry about doubling that for another rack somewhere else in order to potentially avoid a Sherman antitrust lawsuit? Or do I, as a business, say the risk is sufficient enough, or should I say the risk is not big enough for me to, sign a contract that, though this company might say it might keep my data private, are they going to indemnify me if I get hit with a Sherman antitrust lawsuit because I use their AI? You see, these are questions now that the industry needs to answer and address, because it's going to become very, very important with Microsoft, because Microsoft has a partnership with OpenAI. And in fact, this is the same with Google and with everyone else, is that as these AIs are being deployed in multiple businesses and that data is coming in, how is that data being handled? How is it being trained upon? These are the questions that Microsoft and Google need to answer, because they have products and services that are tied into those AI. And so if a company or an organization decides to start using these AIs, they got to ask, hey, at some point, would we be hit with the Sherman Antitrust Act? Because through our use of Microsoft Office, through our use of Google G Suite, through our use of all these AI tied-in software, are we thereby colluding? Because this AI has access to, our data, and they say they isolate it, sure, but it also has access to everyone else's data, and it's making decisions on behalf of the group. Are they acting as a cartel now? Good questions. Good questions that the industry very rapidly needs to figure out. So I figured I'd focus on, today's modern pitfalls, because ultimately I'm very positive that not only will the AI industry be able to figure this out, but they will be able to find a means forward by which everyone can benefit. And I do see that coming because, after the pitfalls comes the treasure. And the treasure ultimately is that we will live in a post-labor society. And that is the goal. But right now we just hit a few road bumps that do need to be solved. So I will catch you in next week's take. This is James signing off.